各位同事，多謝大家出席。
Welcome, members. We have attained the quorum, and it is time to make a start. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There are a couple of them. Will members please have a look and see whether there are any questions? If not, then we move on to items for the next meeting. We have two papers, list of follow actions and list of outstanding items for discussion. There is an item on overcrowdedness. I would like to also include another item on tenants living in oversized flats. The next meeting is scheduled for the 14th of April 2015. There are three items: rent payment for public housing tenants, energy saving in new public housing developments, and marking scheme for estate management enforcement in public housing estates. Just a reminder that there is going to be a special meeting on the 21st of March, and we will be receiving deputations on the long-term housing strategy and the policy address in relation to the housing matters, and members are welcome to attend the public hearing. So we invite the administration in, please. The next item is the review of special stamp duty and buyer stamp duty. Please refer to paper 575, 03 and 04. I will invite the officials to set the scene and give some introductory remarks, and bear in mind the sheer number of members who would like to put questions, and members will be restricted to 4 minutes each. Secretary, once you settle in, please, the floor is all yours. I would like to maximize the time available to us today. Please, Secretary. Madam Chair, in order to address the overheated property market, the government has launched a number of demand management measures, like the special stamp duty introduced in November 2010 by the previous administration, the enhanced SSD in October 2012, and also the buyer stamp duty, as well as the double stamp duty in February 2013. The government gave the undertaking that 1 year after the introduction of the measures, we will report the review findings to members. The implementation of the enhanced SSD and the buyer's stamp duty bill was enacted by the Council in February last year. We've conducted a review on the two items of taxation, and all the details are set out in the paper made available to members today. The findings show that for the SSD and BSD, they were instrumental in combating speculative activities and external demand and stabilizing the market. According to IRD, the short-term transaction, including the confirm more transaction, meaning the buyer sold the property before the assignment has been completed, and also the short-term 24-month resale, there has been a drop, registering 2,661 cases between January and November 2010. It has dropped to 1,195 cases from 2,661 cases. That's between 2010 and October 2012. Between November 2012 and December 2014, and that's as a result of the SSD, the numbers dropped to 127 cases of 2.4% of the total transaction. Short-term resale, Q4 in 2014, remained at a low level, registering 64 cases on average per month, or 1% of the total number of transactions. property transaction involving non-locals and non-local companies as a result of the introduction of the stamp duties. We have seen a reduction from 365 between January and October 2012, before the tax was introduced. It dropped to 115 cases between November 2012 and December 2014, or 2.1% of the total. As regards Q4 2014, it remains at a low level at 106 cases, or 1.7% of the total number. Since the introduction of enhanced SSD and the BSD in October 2012, the increase has moderated. Between January 2009 and October 2012, the rise was 1.7% per month, but between November 2012 and April 2014, the rise dropped to 0.5%. Since a number of jurisdictions are still implementing QE measures, and also given the low interest rate and the tight supply, we noticed that since April 2014, the property prices have resumed its growth. It registered 13% rise in 2014. In particular, the small, medium-sized flats, like the Category A, those below 40 square meters, and Category B, between 40 and 70 square meters. In 2014, they registered a rise of 15 and 14% respectively. Given the low interest rate and the quantitative easing, had the government not taken the measures in 2012, the property market could have been more exuberant, thus affecting the stability of the financial market and our economy. This year, the property market still remains heated. In January this year, compared with 2014 March and also 1997, we have seen a rise of 16.6% and 64% respectively. Between April 2014 and January 2015, we have registered a monthly transaction of 5,900. But Q1 2014, and the number stood at 3,600. The affordability ratio, like a flat measuring 45 square meters, and also bear in mind the prevailing mortgage rate and 20-year repayment period. In Q4 2014, we've seen an increase to 58%, higher than the 47% over the past 20-year period. Having regard to the market situation and external situation, in particular the revival of the property market, we do see the need to maintain the SSD and the BSD. While the administration has been adopting the supply-led strategy and increasing the land supply to resolve the imbalance between supply and demand over the long term, we have to bear in mind that it would take time to make available flats, and in order to minimize the risk arising from the exuberant market and the market situation, we have to do something to curb the exuberance. And members of the public have to bear in mind the risks that they have to bear if the market were to take a reversal, a turn for the worse. On Friday last week, the Hong Kong MA adopted a number of counter-cyclical measures to enhance the banking sector's resilience, and also to minimize all the possible impact arising from market adjustment and also the impact on the economy and the financial market. We will monitor the situation. Ultimately, the solution lies with an increase in supply. The government will not give up or delay any housing project in this regard. Madam Chair, last year, during the resumption of second reading debate, I said that it's only when the stamp duties are withdrawn or adjusted downwards that we will adopt negative vetting mechanism. Any increase will not be subject to a bill. At that time, some members urged the administration to give effect to my undertaking by means of legislation. We did consider this proposal, but given the volatility of the market and also the sensitive sentiments regarding any changes to the SST and the BSD, after careful consideration, we believe that we have to maintain the status quo in order not to introduce any further uncertainties in the market. The undertaking that we made in February last year will remain valid. The government will remain vigilant and monitor the market situation and also the ever-changing external situation. And where necessary, we will not have any hesitation to adopt further measures to curb the exuberance of the market and to prevent the macroeconomic and social consequences. Right, 4 minutes each. I'd like to fit in as many members as possible. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, please. Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Wong Kwok Heng, Kwok Wai Keung, Yu Kwok Him, and Tony Jie. Mr. Wong. Madam Chair. Over the past couple of years, the government adopted these monitoring measures, and I believe that they have yielded positive results. The short-term sale dropped from 2,000 odd to 100 or so cases. However, as we can see, the property prices keep rising and rising. On the Hong Kong MA launched all these counter-cyclical measures. I think it is only fair that they do so. I think they are. It's a matter of time that they introduce these measures. If there is an interest rate hike in the U.S., then it's likely that the bubble might burst. So all these three counter-cyclical measures by the Hong Kong MA are really remedial measures. In the market, we noticed that there are two things that are countering these counter-cyclical measures. First, in response to Hong Kong MA measures, the developers said that they would provide 90% mortgage, and they if you're not allowing them to borrow the money, the developer will offer the borrowing, and I'm worried that these will minimize the impact of the measures. Second, there are some financial institutions linked deposit-taking companies that are offering remortgaging of the properties many times over the properties, and this is increasing the risk of the bubble burst. And these two developments in the market will undermine the counter-cyclical measures. What measures does the government have to tackle this?
Secretary, Madam Chair, the Hong Kong MA launched the 7th round of counter-cyclical supervisory measures. They are to ensure that there will be possible risk management by banks and resilience because there are more uncertainties in the market. Just now the member mentioned developers and other financial institutions offering remortgage facilities. Well, these have to be operated within the boundaries set by the Hong Kong MA. As to the property market trend, as borne out by the figures I mentioned just now, until April last year, after the 2 rounds of demand management measures were rolled out, there was stability in the market in that there was only a very slight increase month on month. But can you not respond to the fact that large developers are standing on the opposite side of the government? You are reducing the LTV ratio, but they are offering it at 90%. So what can you do in response? Madam Chair, the Hong Kong MA's measures are to strengthen banks' risk management and resilience. Every property buyer must consider what kind of affordability risk he has to shoulder if there is a turn in the market, and all developers have to act within the law. I hope you are aware of this very weird situation in the market. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chair. From these figures offered by the Bureau, you could see that the various demand-side management measures were effective in combating short-term resale. This cannot be denied. But as a matter of fact, the Secretary just said that there was a kind of steady increase in the market. But I cannot agree with you because you were playing with figures. You might be dividing up the figures by saying that it is a month-on-month increase. But then if you add them up all together, the increase is quite big. As at the end of last year, the private housing index was at 227.6, and it was 1.6 times the bubble in previous years. If there was a bubble, then are we not having a bubble now? In other words, even if you have these demand-side measures to tackle short-term resale, a lot of people in the sandwich class cannot buy property, especially the newlywed. I am a newlywed myself. You now act like parents. You say newlyweds and young people cannot afford buying a home, and you want to enhance the safety and reduce risks. So you lower the maximum loan-to-value ratio. But then are you not aware of the newlyweds and young families who have been saving up for the first installment or down payment? They may have borrowed from parents, and now you raise the LTV ratio, so now they are again unable and could not afford buying a home. So aren't you aware of the impact on these new families? How can you help them buy their first home so they have a roof over their head? Instead of, newlyweds are going back to their parents' places after having dinner together. Secretary, as I said in my opening remarks, if we look at early 2013, when we introduced the second round of demand-side measures, the prices eased, and in about April 2014, in that year, there was about 0.4% increase month on month, and we could see the trend picking up since April 2014. We, of course, understand, as Mr. Kwok was saying, new families would like to buy their first home. However, the property market is still exuberant, and the government cannot just sit there and do nothing. The Hong Kong MA was looking at this from the perspective of stabilizing the financial system and also having considered the macroeconomic situation. They have launched the 7th round of supervisory measures on property mortgage. As to how we can meet the demand for housing in society, I think it really can be tracked to increasing demand. But people are waiting on end for you to increase supply, and you are suppressing demand now. So you are not actually solving the problem. How can their problem be solved now instead of asking them to wait on end. Secretary, we understand that we should increase supply, but then that really takes time. But if we don't do anything about the exuberance of the market, if there are more volatilities in the property market, people will be exposed to even greater risk. The government and the Hong Kong MA have the responsibility to maintain the stability of our financial market. Mr. Ip Kok Him, can I refer to Annex E, Chart 4? This is the uptrend momentum in flat prices and rentals. I think prices are again picking up. You might be looking more at small-sized flats, but then I believe developers will also be selling high-end flats also at enhanced prices. Mr. Secretary, you said time and again in your opening remarks that the enhanced SSD and BSD were there to curb demand, and in a way you are buying time by introducing these measures so that you have time to find the land to increase supply. But today, can you help us assess the situation? Is it that these two kinds of stamp duties are no longer useful? You said that they were effective, but do you still think that they can cope with the situation? What is your present assessment? Secretary. Chairman, if we look at enhanced SSD, especially the enhanced type introduced at the end of 2012, and also BSD, they are there to curb speculation and short-term resale, and also non-local demand. At that time, we were really only exempting Hong Kong permanent residents. I think in that light, and also from the figures we got, they have been effective. But indeed, starting from April 2014, I think the market began to pick up again. If the exuberance in the market should show us that it is hurting people's overall affordability, and if they are not aligned with our economic fundamentals, then we believe it is not a good trend, and we will be monitoring the situation closely. Right, the Hong Kong MA has launched a new round of measures. They may be useful in suppressing the rising prices because LTV will be limited to 60%. But then, Secretary, are you also worried, as the Hong Kong MA should be as well, that the present situation in the property market would lead to a bubble, and that bubble is going to burst? Chairman, whatever measures the government takes about the property market, we have to be very careful in balancing different factors, and we have to be aware of what impact there will be, and that some of the impact may be direct, some may be indirect. So any time we have to take some measures to respond to the situation, we have to act with prudence. But we must monitor the market carefully. On Friday last, the Hong Kong MA launched a new round of supervisory measures, and we have to see how they will have an effect on the market. But then there is also another consideration on the part of the Hong Kong MA, and that is to ensure that there will be stability in Hong Kong's financial system. These measures may be there to tackle the rising prices of small-sized flats. But what about larger-sized flats? Will there be more measures to tackle that sector of the market? Well, experience in previous years told us that if there is exuberance amongst the high-end flats, there will be a trickling down effect onto the smaller-sized flats. So, in fact, different sectors of the market are going to be affecting one another. Mr. Tony Jie, thank you. Well, Secretary, of course we understand it takes time to increase supply, and therefore you are taking extraordinary measures in these exceptional times for the short term, and I agree with that. I have nothing much to say about that. But as I said before, these measures are going to have an impact on Hong Kong, and you should review the situation. And you have delivered your promise, and you have done this review after 1 year. Are you going to continue doing such reviews? Because you have just told us that these measures will continue. Is it that you are going to take another review 1 year down the road? Secondly, you said that in the past few months you could see the market picking up again, and therefore these measures should continue. I'd like to ask you whether you think the present rate of increase is also too much because it has exceeded 10%. And number 3, some people buy property in the name of companies. Now, of course, now they have to pay more tax. And then, when they buy or sell again, they would do it through non-Hong Kong registered companies. And I have asked that question before, and that is how we can get back some kind of profit tax from them, because people may make use of these channels to do short-term resale without having to pay SSD. Did you do any follow-up action on that? Secretary, I'll pick up the second point first. The Inland Revenue Department, if it is aware that the transactions are there to evade tax that should be paid, I'm sure they will follow up. Sorry, Secretary, is the IRD aware of transactions being undertaken by companies registered overseas by a change in shareholding? Can you do some follow-up? Well, if a company is only changing its shareholding portfolio, that may not be a property transaction and stamp duties may not apply, but then a change in shareholding will also lead to tax paying. I don't know whether my colleagues here have any more to add. If not, we will ask the IRD about this. Secondly, whether it is the SSD or BSD, they are extraordinary measures taken for exceptional times. So we will be aware of the property market development and also economic development. At the beginning of last year, we passed the amendment ordinance, and we promised that we would do a review after 1 year, and we will come back to LegCo, and that is exactly what we are doing now. We'll be watching the market closely. If the member asks us that we should do another review 1 year down the road, we'll be very happy to do it. But we're not going to wait a year. If there are volatilities in the property market, there will be a lot of impact on the economy, and we are actually watching the market day by day. Next one, Wu Chi-Wai. But do you have information about companies doing the transactions? And I'm not only talking about stamp duty. Now, if they make a profit out of property transaction, should there be profits tax paid? Chairman, we don't have the information now. Can we get the information for the member? I'd like to ask about transactions done in the name of companies over the last 24 months. I think there is a drop in such a situation. And some people are registered in BVI. And by so doing, they can evade a lot of tax. And I'm not only talking about stamp duty. I'm maybe talking about profits tax, because they have made a profit and they should pay tax. Can you get the information from the IRD and come back to the member? Next, Wu Chi-Wai, and then Mr. Wong Yuk-man.
Madam Chair, thank you. As we are all aware, no short-term measures will be able to tackle these housing problems. The grassroots people, most of them are waiting for the PRH. Secretary, you have turned down the suggestion of sandwich class housing. Now, these Hong Kong MA counter-cyclical measures will certainly affect the sandwich class people because of the tightening of the LTV ratio. They are looking for flats below $7-8 million. Now, in the policy address, there is mention of the URA subsidizing some of the programs. Now, Mr. Secretary, you have shut the door to any proposal to offer any housing to the sandwich class, given the difficulties in getting on the housing ladder. What measures does the government have up their sleeve to help the grassroots, the sandwich class people? That they are shelling out a lot of money in tax, and they what can you do to help them get on the housing ladder? I'd like to hear from the Secretary in this regard. Secretary, Madam Chair, there are two issues here. First, there is a severe supply-demand imbalance, so the answer to this problem is to increase supply. And the most important thing is to deal with the PRH and HOS. As a matter of policy, the government has no intention of introducing the sandwich class housing above the tier of the HOS, but the chief executive in his policy address did say that the URA can be given a bit of a role. So we will await the discussion of the URA, and they will consider the issues from the perspective of the authority itself. Now, whether the government is going to have the housing for the sandwich class, that is a totally matter altogether. Second, from the volatility of the private sector market, we can see that there will be exuberance in the market, and the government and the Hong Kong MA are duty-bound to do something about the situation. Mr. Wu, I'd like to pick up on the URA from the Secretary. It seems that the URA may at most be able to take one-off measures to address the problem instead of having any long-term measures. Can you clarify on this? In fact, there is a lot of controversy as to whether there is going to be a long-term or short-term. Secretary, I think in answer to a written question by Mr. K.K. Fong, I did say that as a matter of policy, we don't have any intention of reviving the sandwich class housing program. In the community, there is a keen demand for housing, and the URA as a public body, if it can provide certain subsidized housing, then the government would be delighted to see this happen, and we will discuss this going forward. Mr. Raymond Wong and then Mr. Vincent Fang. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, after the introduction of the cooling measures, the government is reporting the findings to us after a year. The paper covers the enhanced SSD and the BSD findings. It doesn't have any information regarding the DSD, the Valorum DSD. Now, it's been going on for a year, and it's time to conduct a review, and I think you ought to make available the information to us. The three cooling measures are fraught with problems, but given the market situation, we support the maintenance of these cooling measures in principle. But I do think the government should be smug about the positive figures. All these measures are not really tackling the problem at source. Unless you deal with the imbalance, the property prices will soar, and this is a ticking time bomb for the financial market and also this community. Now, with the introduction of these measures, we have seen a drop in the number of speculative activities, but the property prices remain sky high. Now, you have put together all these really silly measures. The Hong Kong Abbey introduced measures to lower the mortgage ratio to 60%. Now, some couples may be all set to go ahead with their property purchase, and you are imposing a tighter restriction, and they are denied the opportunity, and you are creating resentment. I'm sure you know everything about it, Mr. Anthony Cheung. This is a really stupid move. Dr. Casey Chen in answer to the reporter's question, urged the members of the public to be understanding that some couples, they just saved enough, maybe for 10 years for this property, and you're imposing tighter burden on the mortgage. How else can they get the money other than robbing? That if they wait a little bit longer, the property prices are going to go up further. I think you are on a collision course with the members of the public. This may not be directly related to this, but I think I have to say this. Now look at the couples who are making savings, like Matt, for the property acquisition. Why do you make them pay 40% of the mortgage, and they have to pay $2.8 million instead of $2.4 million for the down payment, and also the liaison office will be exempted from the SSD, and from recent reports we know that the liaison office has acquired a property in the Western District to the tune of $400 million, and they're exempted from this duty. In November last year, they sold the Kowloon Tong property to the tune of $200 million, and the liaison office for 36 months sold the property without having to pay the SSD. Are they engaging in property speculation? That they are involved in the local property market. And these are mainland local bodies. There is nothing much you can do about it. I mean, you're exempting them from the SSD, and this is wholly unjust. I think you're shining the shoes of the CCP, and this is really shameless. 2 seconds, Secretary, please. Well, regarding the DSD, hasn't been around for a year. By the time it has been around for 1 year, Mr. Casey Chen will make a report to members. Mr. Vincent Fang and Mr. Albert Chan. Madam Chair, my view is similar to Mr. Raymond Wong's. Instead of 70% LTV ratio, now you're lowering it to 60%. Some are very, very close to being able to buy property. Now with this tighter mortgage ratio, they are denied the opportunity. You are saying that you want to maintain the financial stability, and that much I understand. But the world over, the interest rate in the near term will not rise. And even if the interest rate is going to rise, the interest rate that you pay will be less than you would pay with the lowering of the LTV ratio. It would be even harder for the buyers if the property prices are going further up. For those who are purchasing for the first time, I can understand what you're doing with or against the speculators, but what about these first-time buyers? Why don't you give them the exemption? If you keep the 70% LTV ratio, they would stand a pretty good chance of being able to get on the housing ladder. The young people simply cannot acquire their own homes. I understand, Secretary, you said that it would take more than 2-3 years to build. In future, in terms of the housing program, will you give us the definitive timetable regarding the housing production? You can offer them pre-sale units so that they would have some certainty of being able to get on a housing ladder. By the time their flats are completed, they would be able to acquire their own homes. If you introduce all these measures, the property prices will soar, and the mortgage ratio is tightened, further tightened. They will never be able to get their own homes. So will you offer some pre-sale flats for the young people, so that they would know that there would be tens of thousands of units coming on stream in the coming 3-4 years? Well, the other thing I'd like to mention is that the government has collected so much revenue from the cooling measures. Will you offer anything to those who are renting properties, like the $100,000 interest relief and so on? Can you do something to help those who are in the rental market? Secretary, a couple of things, Mr. Fang. In the coming few years, in terms of subsidized housing, HOS, PRH, we do have the rolling 5-year production target within the committee. In the coming 5 years, in terms of HOS, we're talking about well over 10,000 units, or 6,000 or so in the coming 2 years, including the housing society units that will be sold on a pre-sale basis. Now, if we're talking about a pre-sale cycle of 4 to 5 years, given the volatility, the buyers on low pay will have to shoulder a pretty heavy burden, because we have to price the units by the time they are put up for pre-sale. So we have to consider how far ahead we're selling. In the private sector, we're talking about 3-4 months, and in the public sector, there is still such a risk involved. Mr. Albert Chen. Madam Chair. Mr. Anthony Cheung doesn't understand much about transport, that much I understand. But for him to accept this new proposal in terms of housing, I feel really upset and sad. I'm not sure whether C.Y. Leung discussed the matter with you, or is it the case that you were just notified and you just suck it up? I mean, you're so used to sucking it up, and you will never resign to stand up to your principle. I mean, you are so used to this happening that the consequence of this policy, given the academic background that you have, I don't think you would be unable to grasp the policies. I'm sure there are positive factors, but there are also the negative factors that have to be considered in terms of a policy. Now, once this policy has been introduced, the whole world is saying that the young people are finding it so much more difficult to get on the housing ladder. The young people are getting ever more resentful of the government, and you are really intensifying the conflicts in the community. Now, with the tightening of the mortgage ratio, the rental for the small units will really soar insanely. Considering all these factors, I understand the Hong Kong government has to tackle the soaring property market, but this is not one of the only measures. To tackle the soaring market, you have to understand what factors leading to the rise of the market. In Australia, they have for a long time introduced a measure to stop non-residents purchasing the second-hand properties. They also require that if there are any irregularities and non-compliance, there will be prosecution, and they will have to sell off the properties. They understand that there is a lot of shady money that is pouring into the property market.
We know that the prices of small-sized flats are soaring now. That is because you were taking measures to cool the demand for luxurious flats, and therefore the demand has all gone to small-sized flats. And I'm sure there are people who are not the end users. Now you want to cool off the market, and the medium and small-sized flats costing $5 to $6 million are affected, and the real end users and young families are also affected. What you should do is to follow overseas examples and look at the need of Hong Kong PRs and the real users. You should provide them with exemption. Instead of lowering the LTV ratio to 60%, you should actually enhance it to 80% for the real end users. You should be the guarantor of such loans. What happened to me was I enjoyed 90% mortgage ratio. When I bought the flat I used to live in, it was 25, 26 years ago, and I needed only pay $50,000 in down payment for a flat costing $1 million. Now, if I were to pay 40% as what you're requiring people to do, I would never have been able to own property. Think back and why you were able to do it. You yourself were able to buy property, and now that you are in your high-ranking positions, you should not be oblivious to the dire straits people are in. Next, Fernando Zhang, and then Mr. KK Fong. Chairman, the SSD and the BSD, according to the Secretary, have been successful in that they were able to cool off the demand in the market somewhat. But as you also admitted in the paper, when we say the market exuberant, it means there are a lot of transactions, and the other indicator is that prices continue to go up. Now that you have these two demand-side measures, you have told us that there have been fewer short-term resale transactions. That is quite obvious. But then what about property prices? Have they gone down by any margin? No, they have been climbing. You have just said that they have eased for the short term, but then you also admitted in the paper that starting from April last year, again, there was a jump in property prices. If you say these measures are successful, then I would have my doubts about that, because the exuberance of the market can also be exhibited by property prices. Now you have rolled out a tighter mortgage ratio. There would be some negative impact on local end users. However, you might not be able to do the same to external people. Because they don't take out mortgage, they have loads and loads of money taken into Hong Kong to buy property, and so these people will not be affected. So talking about these SSD and BSD, will they be really successful in the long term to combat an exuberant market? Well, I don't think they can. As you said, the affordability ratio raised to 58% in the fourth quarter of last year. In other words, a family has to fork out 58% of the household income to pay mortgage payments. I think that is the highest in the whole wide world, and international surveys have shown that Hong Kong property is the most unaffordable. There is also a lot of speculation. Shouldn't you consider other kinds of tax, including capital gains tax or vacant property tax? You say in the short term you can cool the number of transactions, but then okay, the buyers may hold the property for a longer time, and the property is left there vacant, but then you don't actually add a lot to their cost, because the property they hold will continue to rise in value. However, if anybody leaves the flat idle or vacant and you charge tax on that, then there will be a bigger supply in the market, and also rentals can be kept at a reasonable level. Why don't you consider those kinds of tax so that there would be more normal supply in the market, and so prices and rentals will not continue to soar? Secretary, in my opening remarks, I said that the SSD was there to combat short-term resale, and the BSD are to tackle non-local buyers. And in fact, such transactions have indeed remained very low in numbers. If we talk about SSD in the fourth quarter of 2014, that only took up 1% of the total transactions, and BSD that only accounted for 1.7%. So the percentages have remained low. Of course, we can see that there is an upward trend again since April 2014. We can see that from the figures and data, and we will be watching closely. As the Financial Secretary said, we will not hesitate to take more measures to tackle this if this continues. Mr. KK Fong, these two so-called tough measures that you have adopted, they have been successful in the first year, but then not anymore since last year. And the Hong Kong MA has launched the 7th round of supervisory measures, and the maximum LTV ratio would be lowered to 60%. In other words, you have to pay 20% of property price at down payment. You actually were trying to target non-local speculators, but now you seem to be targeting local, real end users. Is it because you think the bubble is going to burst anytime soon? So you want to, in a way, frighten off more locals from the property market so that not so many people would become victims if there is a turn in the market. Well, you know that the two tough measures are not working anymore because there has been an upward trend in the last 12 months. And I believe this new round of measures will not be successful in the long term. What is your assessment of this possibility? Secretary. Chairman. As Mr. Fong said, starting from April last year, or maybe starting from mid-year, we could see that there were again signs of exuberance, and in the recent months, the situation has become quite serious. We have to analyze the causes of such exuberance because we have to take measures to tackle the causes. But then, no matter what, we'll be watching the situation, and if necessary, we will be rolling out appropriate measures. The Hong Kong MA took some measures on Friday, mainly because they would like to maintain financial stability and also strengthen banks' resilience. So they did not only have property prices in mind. Let me follow up. However, the Hong Kong MA is affecting people who would really like to buy property because these measures have a direct relationship to property owning. Is it that you knew of these measures before they were announced and you agreed with those? And that is because you are worried that there would be further increase in prices and so the bubble may burst. Sorry, Chairman, as the Secretary, I should not be speculating on the trend of property prices here. Let me follow up. It has been proven that these measures will dip in effectiveness once they have been introduced for some time. If these are not effective, what kind of other measures can you take? Chairman, I can only say that we will be watching the market closely, and if necessary, as the Financial Secretary said, we will not hesitate at all to take more measures. Do I still have more time? Yes, you have 1 more minute. The Financial Secretary read his budget last week, and he said there was extra income resulting from the tough measures. That is why we have a big surplus recorded. But in fact, $2.7 million has been put aside as a housing reserve before he prepared this budget. But now you say that there is more income, and that has gone into the surplus resulting from the housing market. So would you consider making use of this part of the surplus on the private housing market? Because you have not done anything to help the people of Hong Kong with regard to rising prices and rentals. So such extra income from the housing market, would that be used for the housing market in that you would help people tackle the higher prices and rentals? Indeed, the Financial Secretary has put aside $27 billion as the housing reserve. However, we still need approval from the Finance Committee. Yes, we can do a lot more if there is extra income, including supporting public housing development, and that is exactly the objective of the housing reserve. However, as for rent subsidy, we already said in the past that this would just allow the landowner to know that the tenant would be more able to afford higher rentals, and so rents may also go up. Okay, I will use my 4 minutes now. If we look at the figures, indeed the number of transactions have been reduced. However, what is unfortunate is that property prices have continued to rise. So, Secretary, I think you should think about other measures. I believe there are other causes for property prices to continue to go up, and you have to tackle that with more measures. You have said that the Hong Kong MA measures might not have to do with the housing market because they were looking at financial stability and resilience of the banks. However, if you say that the Hong Kong MA is not helping you tackle the housing market, then your bureau would have to think of other measures to stabilize the property market. And I hope you can come back and report to us again a year later. And that is the effect on the effectiveness of the SSD. And also in due course or at the appropriate time, give us the information on the ad valorem DSD. Just now, Tony G asked you a question, but that was not answered. He asked you whether you think that the rate of increase in property prices is too high. If yes, what can you do about it? And you said time and again that the Hong Kong MA's latest measures are not directly related to housing policies. But we can see a negative impact resulting from the Hong Kong MA measures. We can see that the bubble may burst for small-sized flats, and so the Hong Kong MA is doing this in anticipation of that. However, the Hong Kong MA can only regulate banks, but not other financial institutions, as Mr. Wong Kwok Hing said. So maybe you cannot do anything, but can't you talk to the FST Bureau to see what can be done to regulate the financial institutions, because people may not be turning to banks but to financial institutions for mortgage arrangements. And also there is another negative impact resulting from the tightening of the LTV ratio. In fact, many members have mentioned the same point, and that is people might have saved up enough money for down payment and now they are kept out of the door. So how can you resolve that problem? And in future, in terms of subsidized housing, can you increase the supply? And what can you do to help those people? Just now, Wu Chi-wai talked about increased supply by URA and also the building of more public housing flats. And also in the budget read out last week, you mentioned the premium loan guarantee scheme so that home ownership flats owners can be given help in paying up the premium without having to repay the loan for the moment, so that they can be more flexible with dealing with their HOS flats. So when are you going to do it? Okay, Chairman, a few questions. As for the financial institutions, if they are involved in mortgage loans, I believe the rate is not high. I know the Hong Kong MA is watching the situation, and I will relay your concern to the FSTB. Increasing subsidized public housing, that is also our target, but it takes time, and this is also our objective. As for the Hong Kong Mortgage Corporation, which is considering a new premium loan guarantee scheme, they are now looking at the details. The objective is to allow HOS owners greater flexibility in disposing of their flats. In other words, by paying up the premium, they would be freer in dealing with their flats. But I must emphasize again, this is not a kind of welfare, because the Hong Kong MC will be charging interest rate according to the market situation, and also they have to act according to prudent financial measures. Okay, that is the end of this item. Thank you, Secretary, and your team. Let's get on to the second item of the meeting. Next one. Review of income and asset limits for public rental housing for 2015-16. We have a few papers. CB bracket 1575 bracket 05 and also CB bracket 1575 06. I know there will be a short PowerPoint presentation by the government, and then the floor will be open to questions by members.
Madam Chair, my colleague, Assistant Director Mr. John Hong, will take members through the presentation.
Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. in accordance with the established mechanism, the Housing Authority, the Subsidized Housing Committee will review the income and asset limits for public rental housing. This year, the Housing Department, in accordance with this mechanism, and also in accordance with the objective data, conducted the review and submitted the recommendations. All the recommendations are sent out in the paper. On the 17th of March, the SHC will hold its meeting. We will be relaying members' input to the committee so that when they take the final decision, they will have regard to members' views. I will, with the aid of the PowerPoints, introduce this particular mechanism. In terms of the review of PRH income limits, it is the Housing Authority's policy to offer PRH to those who cannot afford the rental housing in the private market. So we will look at the actual expenditure on the part of the households plus a contingency. In relation to the housing element, there are two parts. The left side is the housing cost. There are two factors under the housing cost. The first one is the unit rent for private flat comparable to PRH times the flat size. Now we will look at the average reference flat size for the applicants. Now on the right-hand side, we have the non-housing cost. We will have regard to the General Household Survey by the Census and Statistics Department, and this is collected every 5 years. So we will look at the Consumer Price Index, excluding the housing costs, or we would look at the income factor, like a change in the nominal wage index. So factors C and D, we will take the highest one in the review exercise. Now, all these figures are subject to change every year, so we will have regard to the changes year on year. Now here in this slide, these are the four key parameters. So the first one is the differential unit rents of private flats. For 1P and 2P households, it is likely that their rental might be slightly higher. If they are higher than the overall figure, then we will adopt the 1P or 2P figures. As regards the reference flat size, we look at the average space allocated to PRH applicants in the past 3 years. As regards the non-housing cost, we look at the CPI excluding the housing cost. The rise is 4.5%, but the nominal wage index is 4%. We adopted a higher one out of the two, and that is 4.5%. Now we are proposing an increase of something like 4.8% in terms of the PRH income limits. The statutory contribution under the MPF are not included in the household income. As regards the mechanism for the review of PRH asset limits, things are a little bit more straightforward. We basically look at the changes in the movement or in the CPI A index. Now the movement is 7%, so that's why you see that the review for 2015-16 figure is 7%. Subject to members' acceptance, we're not sure how many households will become eligible as a result of that, but normally we would provide some statistics to the SHC of the Housing Authority, and that is in para 12 of the paper. If we're merely looking at the household income, we will ascertain how many will be eligible. The number we provide is 137,500. Of course, there are some limitations to this figure because it doesn't look at other factors like the asset and so on. And there may be some who are already in the queue for PRH. This figure doesn't include some of the family members who are already in the rental housing but are interested in making application for PRH themselves. I must mention that there is a condition that for those who have been living in rental housing for 10 years and they have exceeded the limit, they will have to pay additional rent. Should this new proposal be accepted, we will also make adjustment to the limit in this regard, and all the details are set out in Annex C. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. All right, and I'll throw the floor for questions. Mr. Wong Kok Heng and then Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. 4 minutes, please. Madam Chair. Now, this adjustment is done in accordance with the mechanism. Of course, I will support it. But with the adjustment, then I'm sure that the number of people eligible for rental housing will increase. Maybe it will go beyond 300,000. But the housing production will not be able to catch up with the number. So my question for the administration is this. Have you ever considered how many of the applicants in the waiting list are actually rental housing tenants themselves? Now, the reason I put this question is because the well-off tenant policy results in a lot of the households, in order to avoid the double rent, would make the working family members make the applications themselves so that they can be taken out of the tenancy. Now that way they would be spared the threat of having to pay double rent, or they would cease to be well-off tenants. Have you ever considered this at this particular issue? Madam Wong? Madam Chair, I don't have with me the information that Mr. Wong sought. I will have a look and see whether this can be made available. For those who are living in rental housing, if they want to split up the household, is it really an attempt to avoid the double rent? We're not sure because there are many other factors, but we will try to collect the information that Mr. Wong sought. Permanent Secretary. Madam Chair, like Agnes said a moment ago, for those tenants in the rental housing, there are many reasons why they would like to apply for PRH. Like, for instance, in a recent case, the father is living with 3 generations, and he got married again and would like to seek another tenancy, and it doesn't have anything to do with being well off. Mr. Wong, the HD doesn't have the information, and I hope that from now on you will collect this kind of data, because this will be important to enable us to have a fuller picture. We'd like to find out about why the PRH tenants are interested in making application for another PRH. Now, for these well-off tenants, it's not the case that they want to be well-off tenants. It's just that the kids have grown up and the total household income has increased. Now, we'd like to leave as much wealth to the residents as possible, but under the policy, they have to make the declaration, and if they go beyond the limit, they have to pay 1.5 times the rent, and they will be categorized as well-off tenants, and there are problems with that. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung and Mr. KK Fong. Madam Chair, on Mr. Wong's question, I hope that the administration will look into this. There are more and more senior citizens who are living alone, and I'm not sure whether this is the result of the well-off tenant policy, and many of the family members will move out, and nobody is looking after the other senior citizens as a result. Now, this has to do with the supply of the rental housing. This also has to do with the supply of accommodation in the private sector. Now, if we can relax the well-off tenants policy, the family members will have to look after the parents. They may find it cheaper to support their family, their senior parents or their parents, than they rent in the private sector, and it is worth it for them. That the number in the waiting list is going to go up from 260,000 to 300,000 as a result of this review. Under the long-term housing strategy, we're going to have 200,000 units in the coming 10 years. And this will be subject to review each year. In other words, the shortfall will remain with us in 10 years, after 10 years. In the waiting list, half of the people are singletons or who are not elderly. A lot of them are students or undergraduates. How are you going to help them to get on the housing ladder? We said a moment ago that they are very close to being able to acquire their own homes, and you're imposing a tighter mortgage ratio, and this coupled with ever rising property prices and the exceedingly high HOS prices, they would find it very difficult to acquire their own homes. The FTU has been advocating another rung in the housing ladder above above the PRH and below the HOS.
In fact, young people don't want to wait for PRH for their entire life. They like to own their property, but then they have no choice because the prices are way beyond their affordability. You talked about the financial stability, and you make it more difficult for people to be first-time home buyers. So I cannot see a way out. If you cannot afford anything in the private market, you have to go for the public housing market. So talking about helping young people tackle their housing needs, what more can be done? You talk about youth hostels. but then we cannot see anything being realized. And also, other kinds of subsidies, etc. What more can you do? P.S. Mr. Kwok asked questions covering a really big area. He made certain views about the well-off tenant policy. We discussed this last year at the HA, and people also asked us to relax it. But then there are other people saying that we should in fact tighten up the well-off tenant policy. At that time, the HA said that we should revisit the issue later on, and we will take reference to Mr. Kwok's views. I have no more time. Okay, we'll go to KK Kwok, and then KK Fong, and then Tony Jia. Chairman, I say this every year. The income limit calculation is problematic because you use the survey and you apply it to rentals throughout Hong Kong. But then we have the urban area, the extended urban area, and the new territories where rentals are not the same. It is, of course, most expensive in the urban area, and you go for the median figure, and it will benefit the NT residents because they should be paying lower rents than the median point. If the median point is like $20 a square foot, and then it should be more expensive in the urban area than $20 and less expensive than $20 in the NT. And so there will be unfairness resulting, and it is not fair to these people. But in fact, when the HA sets the rental levels, it doesn't do the same. It is cheaper for new housing in the NT, and it is more expensive for extended urban areas, and it is also even more expensive than the urban in the urban area. So that you should charge different rent for the different areas. However, when you go for a survey, you just go for a median figure. If you are talking about one-person, two-person households, you say they are a special category, so you do not apply the across-the-board level, and they are not included in that income limit calculation. So I like to challenge you about this. It seems you say it will be a broad brush approach adopted for the waiting list. However, the rents are different when you actually set them for the different regions in the territory. So I'd like to ask you, why can't you have different figures for calculating income limit for the different regions? Now, of course, if people line up for the NT and then the extended urban area and also the urban area, then they will be subject to different income limits. In other words, if you want to queue up for a flat in the urban area, you should be subject to a higher income limit. I think in that case, there will be fairness, but what you are doing now is not fair. Ms. Wong, let me try to explain. I think we had some exchange about this in the past. We go for an average figure because the benchmark is if you cannot rent a comparable private flat in the market, then you are eligible for public housing. But for people in the waiting list, we don't know where they live. Today, they may live in the urban area, but next year they may live in the NT. And in the end, when it comes to an offer being made to that waiting list applicant, we don't know where that flat will be. So it's difficult to say. If you say now they live in the urban area, so they should be subject to a different income limit. Well, what if they move house the next year? If you say there should be an income limit for the urban area, the extended urban area, and then the NT, well, it might not be something good for the waiting list applicants. Now we go for an average, and we think that is a fairer way of doing it. But we have special treatment for one-person, two-person households. Because if they have a smaller household, the average number may be higher for them. So we have to consider that differential unit rent for these smaller households. Now I'm saying if you go for a higher income limit for people in the urban area, this is because they also pay a higher rent. If you have the same phase of PRH in the urban area and the NT, you charge a rent that is 10 to 20% higher in the urban area. So shouldn't you have a higher income limit for the applicants as well? Tony J. and then Fernando Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. You are doing a review according to the established mechanism. Well, again, I don't want to quibble with that. I'd just like to seek more information. Under that mechanism, you have the housing cost and the non-housing cost. I'd like to ask about housing cost, and I'd like to refer to paragraph 5. You say that it is a unit rent derived from a sample survey of private dwellings conducted by the CNSD. I find this rather strange. Why do you ask the CNSD to do a sample survey? When you do a review, why don't you just go for the latest information and set the rents accordingly? Why do you want to do a sample survey? If you go for a sample survey, how many samples do you take? Secondly, now you have different income and asset limits set, but somebody mentioned the waiting list applicants. Is it that there would be more people becoming eligible because of this relaxation? Will you review the applicants from time to time? Some of them might be eligible at the beginning, but after some time, these people may be promoted, they have a higher income, and so they are not eligible anymore. Do you review such applicants, or do you just add people and names to the list? Who will take the question? Mr. Hong? Chairman, let me talk about the rent survey. This is part of the general household survey done by the CNSD. That would mean that we already adopt the latest figures. Mr. Chair asked about the applicants' eligibility while they are on the waiting list. And what happens if they have a higher income? We do a review before an offer is made to see whether the applicant is still eligible for PRH. The average waiting time is about 3 years, and there will be a review done during those 3 years. As for non-elderly singletons, since they wait for a longer time, we said at this panel earlier that we would introduce a regular survey of these applicants, so member can rest assured about this. I'd like to follow up on the first point. Paragraph 3 of the paper says that the housing cost is to measure the cost of renting a private flat comparable to PRH. But then now you go for the sample survey done by the CNSD. It is a sample survey. Does it mean that those samples would certainly include private flats of comparable size? I'm sorry if I'm confusing you, but it's quite simple, isn't it? If you look at a private flat of a certain size and if the rents have gone up by a certain margin, then that's it. Why do you still want to do a sample survey? Mr. Hong. Actually, let me try to explain it. There will be different flat sizes, and we go for the average per square meter rent. And we would limit it to under 70 square meters, meaning we only look at rental for medium and small-sized flats. As to the calculation of the PRH rent, it would be a multiplication between that rent level and the average size of PRH flats being delivered. Well, I understand. That would mean that very possibly there will be a bigger increase for smaller flats. In fact, this is happening in the private market. Is that being reflected now? You use this as an established mechanism, but you say that you limit the samples to flats under 70 square meters. but that might not have a lot to do with the PRH sizes because you only go for an average. Fernando Zhang and then Leung Kwok Hong. You go for the average rental of a flat size, which is 69.9 square meters. But that may not give you the real picture about rent increases, because I believe the majority of households in the waiting list may not be living in flats of such sizes. You say below 70 square meters of saleable area. But how many families in Hong Kong do you think are really living in flats of that size? We have subdivided units, and the rental increase in these units is even more serious. In fact, the smaller the size, the more serious the increase. And if you look at these people in the waiting list who are now living in subdivided units, I think they are paying much higher rent than what you are showing us from this formula. And I can say that these percentage changes may not be reflecting the real picture. But of course, the percentage increase now is already much more than in previous years because of hefty rent increases. Of course, we support this because people are really toiling under the hefty rents. Of course, there may be more people added to the list because they become eligible. And if supply is still suppressed, there will be a bigger problem. And the situation may be polarized. In other words, there will be fewer and fewer people who can afford their own homes in the market. And there will be more people at the other end who are eligible for public housing. And of course, it's like winning a Mark 6. If you're offered a public housing unit and a few years down the road, you may be able to use a green form to buy HOS, and then you can also benefit from the guarantee loan scheme or premium scheme, so you can buy a private flat. And then they can join the big gambling floor. There will be more people in the queue, and C.Y. Leung is saying we should allow him to use green belts or private land in NTNE. He is telling people that they should move out and allow him to build housing. But then he is not only talking about PRH. He may be building luxury housing so people can go up the housing ladder. I think you are beating below the belt. I think what you should do is to increase the supply of public housing. You have a high land premium policy, so people pay hefty rents. But you don't care. You still limit public housing supply, and at the same time you continue with your high land premium policy. So no matter what you do to adjust these averages, people can just wait. There are over 200,000 in the list now. There will be 300,000 very soon. And how long do people have to wait? Are you confident that you can deliver your promise of a 3-year waiting period? P.S. Mr. Zhang says that we limit public housing supply. I don't think that is the case under the LTHS. When we wrote out the LTHS, we said that it would be supply-led. We would set objectives and then we'll be providing public rental housing. And members showed concern as to whether we can deliver those targets. And we said that we are working very hard. We have the resolve. It is just that we are limited by upstream manufacturing factors, meaning manpower and land. But we'll continue to work hard.
Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, Madam Chair, this may not have anything to do with C.Y. Leung alone. The entire SAR government doesn't or cannot interfere with the property market. It is entirely led by the private sector. Whatever you do, you're making sure that there will be no property crash. Home and Tin, with the demolition of the flats. Private housing has been built. Wong and Jordan Valley. And I go there quite a lot, and there are luxury properties that have been built. Instead of having a PRH, you are putting the high-end luxury properties in their places. Now, if you think that those on the PRH waiting list can purchase them, that's another matter altogether. I think you've got the policy wrong. Now, Mr. Ying, I'd like to put this to you. In NENT, the ratio used to be 40-60 40-60. Now it has been reversed. And with such a vast development in the NENT, is it in line with your long-term housing strategy to build so few or so little popular rental housing? Permanent Secretary. Madam Chair, under the LTHS, we will build 290,000 public housing units. And if everything goes smoothly, we're going to reach 250,000. And there is a bit of a gap, and we still have to work harder. We will look at the economic situation in Hong Kong. We will look at the decision of the Development Bureau. Now, everything is going to be supply-led. And at the end of the day, we have to increase the supply. So we will work hard to achieve these 290,000 target. Mr. Leung, I do have doubts whether you can achieve that 290,000. And if you fall short of that, you will not be able to resolve the problem. And you have to get more land. Now, let me put this specifically. With NENT, and you've got to offer compensation to the tune of $30 billion. And in NENT, do you think you will ask the Development Bureau to set aside more land for PRH, or to build HOS which is affordable to more people? Can you tell us straight away? If you can have another 20,000 in NENT, then you will have 310,000 instead of 290,000. So you're saying that there would be more public housing in the NENT. Well, we can slash a bit of land from the golf course. Well, the golf course is not part of the NENT. Are you saying that we get land from the NT? We can have these as a compensation. Permanent Secretary. Well, it is the Development Bureau that is responsible for the land policy, but for individual plots, I think we can discuss individually. The Housing Bureau is responsible for housing, but I appreciate that there is demand for land from many different quarters. I think we have to leave it to the Development Bureau. Mr. Leung. Well, it is not me who said that housing is a top priority. These are not my words. These are C.Y. Leung's words. Right, let me use my 4 minutes. Permanent Secretary, in this exercise, the rate of increase is the highest in terms of the income and asset limits. I think that's because the rental has become so much higher, and as a result, the adjustment is so much higher as well. Under this mechanism, there is a flaw. Now, because of the market situation, now that the market situation is quite weird these days, in the sense that the foot-for-foot rental for small units are so much higher than other components. and you cannot. This mechanism doesn't reflect this situation, and you are basing the calculation on the expenditure. Now, for the grassroots people, we only have item D in terms of income, and we're not sure whether they will be able to get the rental housing. Now, let's say there is a couple, if they are working as security guards, earning the SMW, and they would be too rich to apply for PRH. It's only when they are working 8 hours instead of 12 hours that they would be eligible. And as a result of this adjustment, they would become eligible if they work for 8 hours instead of 12 hours. Now, they are working exceedingly long hours, and they are not able to become eligible. And they have to struggle for the rental in the subdivided units. I'm not sure how long this dysfunctional property market is going to be, and I'm sure each year you come here, we will tell you that the rental expenditure for the grassroots people are not reflected here, because the smaller the units, the more expensive they're paying in rent. So, Mr. Secretary, Permanent Secretary, how soon are you going to review this mechanism, having regard to the actual situation? How can you make sure that this will reflect the needs of the grassroots more? Now, for these earning slightly more than $10,000, they would become eligible. But in the public housing estates, things are exceedingly expensive. I think that's because of the monopoly of the link rate of the shopping malls and the car parking spaces in some housing estates. And they are selling the car parking spaces. Now, the monthly rate and the hourly rate for the car parking spaces are going further up. Now, these people are earning more than $10,000. Now, how can you provide facilities to them that are more affordable? Permanent Secretary. Now, as regards the mechanism, as we said in the paper, the Housing Authority will look at the mechanism each year, and in the process they would have regard to various comments, like the design of the mechanism. What members raised today will certainly report it to the SHC to see whether they would take them on board. I've been involved in a number of discussions. The time is up. I don't think I can make a reply in greater detail. Any further comments? Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Madam Chair. Well, I can't really not say anything, having listened to you. There are some tenants from Lam Tin who rang me up to say that it would cost them to buy a flat for $300,000, but it would cost them $700,000 to buy a car park. That's because the link rate has hived off the car parks for sale. It is more expensive to buy a car park than it is to buy a flat. The link rate is turning everything into commodities. I think you have to be treading carefully. Once this has been commercialized, there will be speculative elements coming in. I think I have to issue a warning to you. If there is speculation over properties, there is also a speculation over parking spaces. Now, once they acquired the properties, they will be able to resell them. Also, a moment ago, you said that it would be difficult for you to interfere with the work of the Development Bureau, but we're talking about one single government here. So perhaps either the CS, the FS, or CY Leung can put in charge of it. We're not trying to make life difficult for you. there is a new phenomenon in Hong Kong that the land sale proceeds will be less than the salaries and profits tax put together. So you can sell less land, and you can set aside land for PRH. Now this is the deformed land. We can do away with some of the land sale proceeds, and we just build on them for PRH. Are you going to talk to the relevant people? Now, if you have the land in application list, the developers can't be bothered. Now, if they can't be bothered, then LegCo can trigger the land for PRH production. Can this happen? Permanent Secretary. Well, of course, I agree that the Development Bureau is part of the government. To be more precise, I've noted members' views and will reflect members' views to the Development Bureau regarding the NENT and the rest of it. Mr. Leung, well, do away with the land sale. If the developers can't be bothered about triggering the land for tender, for auction, then you build on them. I don't think we can say that this is a highland policy anymore. In Taiwan, the developers can't be bothered putting in the bid. Now, if this is the case, then we can certainly use the land for PRH production. You have to talk with Paul Chan, Carrie Lam, and the CE. Now, previously, we counted a lot on the land sale proceed. Now, this is not the case anymore. Don't you agree? Permanent Secretary? Are you going to refer or relate this to the Development Bureau? Yes. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Madam Chair, we welcome this adjustment, but the consequence is that the queue for PRH will be lengthening, and the waiting time will be getting ever longer. I think there can be further relaxation because those households, the households above this limit are really struggling, and they are too rich to apply for PRH, but they can't afford to own their own homes, and it is very, very expensive to rent in the private sector. Now, if you're aware of this situation, doesn't the government have the obligation to help these households, like offering them some rental subsidy and so on? There are people who have been on the waiting list for PRH for more than 3 years. Would you consider some form of rental subsidy so that they would have a bit of a relief and they will not see any further delays because of the adjustment in this exercise, and they will be able to get housing sooner rather than later? Permanent Secretary? Well, a rental subsidy, I think we keep talking about this in this context. I think we have explained the government's position many, many times. In answer to members' questions, the Secretary already said that from the policy point of view, a rental subsidy will not be a good answer to the problem. Dr. Zhang, well, they said that this is the answer to the problem, but you don't have the answer to the problem at all. Now, this may not be a good answer to the problem. Now, we are suggesting that we should have a rental control. Now, you said this is not the answer. Capital gains tax, and you say that this is not the answer to the problem. What about taxing people on the property that is sitting empty? You said this is not the answer to the problem.
I see.
That means you don't have any good answer. However, the people are suffering. People think that you are not a good answer. It seems we are providing solutions and answers, and you don't have answers and solutions. You are only negating our answers and solutions. Well, they have only one answer, and that is to increase supply. Well, they have a 10-year construction program, and you are also picking out from HOS stock in order for people to buy them. So the supply will in fact decrease when the demand continues to go up. Chairman, I don't know what to do because this government has no answers and the problems remain unresolved. We are providing pragmatic solutions, so at least you indicate a direction. Don't act like an opposition camp. Don't just say no and ban all the solutions. Why don't you come back with proposals? P.S. The member should know that we have had a lot of exchanges on these broad policies, especially during the one-year consultation period on LTHS. We have mentioned all these topics. Well, yes, but it doesn't mean that we have found a solution. Can I please continue? Yes. Therefore, under the LTHS, we have looked at these issues. We have also discussed rent control in that policy paper. Our view is policy-wise, we should have a supply-led solution supported by other proposals in order to tackle long-term demand. But then supply is still a problem. You're talking about 40,000 every year, 20,000 maybe PRH, but then you're not going to accomplish it. There are 200,000 people waiting. So, I mean, the figures don't tally in any way. Well, I don't think he will give you any other answer other than increasing supply. Next member, Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. We have this review mechanism, and it has been with us for some time. But as I said last year, perhaps the government should consider the mechanism again. If you separate the income limit calculation into housing and non-housing cost, in terms of housing cost, you have to look at PRH as well as the private market. You said that the CNSD would do a sample survey of private market flats, but you limit it to 70 square meters in size. Well, I don't know too much, but I don't think you have too many PRH flats of that size. I believe applicants are mainly small households. You do a sample survey, but in fact that is quite mind-boggling for me. I think you should have a lot of private market rent information. The Rating and Valuation Department should have all that. And that is a direct reflection of the rental market. If you talk about small-sized flats measuring over 20 square meters, I believe this is the prevalent size for PRH. And you cite examples of flats of 30 square meters. I think that kind of units take up a big proportion of PRH units. So why don't you consider having a more direct comparison? And therefore, you can better reflect the expenditure on housing. And people may find that more akin to the real situation. Well, of course, this is about reviewing the mechanism itself, and it is not about reviewing the limits. I won't object to those. If you make it more relaxed, I would not object to it. But I would agree with the chairman that you should go back and reconsider having a direct reflection of the situation in the private market, because after all, you are talking about affordability. There may be a chance to for you to increase the income limit even more, so more people will become eligible. But you should not stop from doing this just because you don't want to do anything about the mechanism. I hope really you would take a second look at the mechanism so you have a more direct reflection of the private market. You know, these people cannot afford renting a private flat, so they are waiting for PRH or subsidized housing. People have the hope even if they have to wait long. I just like to say that really I will ask you to look at the mechanism again to improve upon it. Deputy Secretary. We will take this back to the Housing Authority, but let me take the opportunity to explain a little why we make it so complicated. We want to use the survey by the CNSD, and we get the average rent, and then we would compare it to PRH sizes. This is a sample survey which is a part of the regular general household survey. We are already going for smaller size flats because we go for flats below the size of 69.9 square meters, and they are taking samples from every district and every kind of housing, including SDUs. And as for one-person or two-person households, since the average rent they pay may be higher, we therefore would say that the respective differential unit rent or the overall average unit rent, whichever is higher, will be adopted in the calculation. As for the CNSD, maybe they are looking at new tenancies signed. They may not be able to cover old tenancies. And we'd like to reflect both rentals from old and new tenancies. P.S. It seems Mr. Chair is saying that we make things complicated by going for a sample survey, but maybe he doesn't know that the CNSD always conducts the general household survey to serve other departments, and therefore departments would avail themselves to this survey because the CNSD would always give us the sample surveys, and therefore we also go for this general household survey by adding one question to it so that we can also gauge the rentals in the private market. But we have heard members. Thank you very much. This item is concluded. We go to the next item, and now we'd like to invite the government officials to come in. This is proposed creation of one permanent chief architect post in the housing department for coping with the additional workload arising from the further increase in public housing production target. The paper is CB-1575-07. Let us see who will take us through the paper. Chairman. Because of time constraint, I will just give you the gist of the paper. And the Deputy Director, Ms. Ada Fong, will be joining me. As the chairman said, if members would agree, we'd like to propose the creation of one permanent chief architect post in the housing department. Starting from para 2, we give you the background, and I will not be too detailed about it. This is telling members that in the past period, we have been increasing the supply of public housing flats. And as I said, this is a mission that we have to work very hard at, and we have to also supply different resources in order to achieve this. In the past, we have had the support of members in creating directorate posts, and para 3 gives you the history of directorate posts already created. And now we'd like to increase the contingent by one chief architect. In para 8, you will see the list of 8 CA posts, and 2 of them are to do support and logistics, including development and standard matters, and the other one is responsible for procurement, and the other 6 CAs work as project managers, and they lead other professional colleagues and non-directorate colleagues, so they handle different public housing projects. If we could create another CA post that will also align with the increase of 150 non-directorate posts this year. And if we can do that, then we can increase one more team in addition to the present 6 for public housing construction. So we can work faster and we can produce more public housing. This is the basic proposal. In terms of financial implications, this is in para 14. The D1 post salary is like what we say in para 14 and para 15. As I mentioned, there will be non-directorate posts that will be created to support the public housing construction work. I hope members will support the proposal. Any questions? Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. We all know that we need land, money, and also manpower in order to build more public housing. And I think the LegCo will support you with any increase of manpower proposals. If we don't support you or approve your applications, then public housing will be built at a slower pace. However, apart from creating this directorate post, what about the front line? You are talking about 150 non-directorate posts. How are they distributed? Are you going to be able to cope with the housing stock that will have to be supplied? I think 2 years ago, we had the view from the trade union that, in fact, there is also a tight contingent of professional colleagues. I don't know whether this 150 will already satisfy the demand of the trade union. P.S. Chairman, as you know, we have an annual planning exercise for increasing resources, and we always come to LegCo for funding support. The 150 posts are just for housing construction, and we believe this is what we are asking for in terms of non-directorate resources for this year. But we will have to watch how our work goes, and if necessary, we will have to work hard to secure more manpower resources. I cannot predict what we're going to do, but as the controlling officer, I will continue to review manpower and other resources according to the progress of our work. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Housing is what the present term of government has emphasized. We must give them sufficient manpower, and I support increasing manpower resources for this purpose. And as we were saying, it's not just about turning out a bigger housing stock. Timing is also an issue. And there is also the issue of quality. Quality matters. Public aspirations are also going up continuously. I therefore agree with what you say in para 9, that now you have to be responsible for much broader and much more complicated matters. Very often, you want to secure land, but then you have to solve different problems. Sometimes the lots are small, sometimes they are not of regular size, and you have to solve all these problems. And I also mentioned public aspirations. So you have to consider different aspects. Apart from just doing your work, you also have to respond to maybe noise, air ventilation matters as well. So I support this paper. You are trying to create a directorate post, but I'm also concerned about other posts. You mentioned 150 for this year. I hope there will be enough manpower to deliver your work targets. This paper talks about a chief architect. I hope you will also look at other posts. So I'd just like to say I support the proposal.
Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Madam Chair, thank you. So this new CA is responsible for projects, is that right? Some are responsible for procurement. So this team is put in charge of projects. Permanent Secretary? Yes, indeed. So we need 150 non-directorate civil servants, is that right? Permanent Secretary. The 150 do not come under this chief architect. I talked about 150. They are responsible for the production. Like Mr. Kwok and Mr. Chair said, other than directorate post, we have the foreman, the technical staff. Altogether, the number stands at 150. Mr. Leung. Now, with the creation of this CA post, he's in charge of all the production projects and the projects that you may not be able to achieve without these particular posts, right? So without these posts, you run out of manpower. You have 8, 6 dealing with others, and 2 are in charge of projects. And now with this additional post, you have an additional CA to put in charge of the project. Is that right? May I refer members to Annex B? This gives members some ideas of the major duties. As number 1 indicates, he is responsible for housing projects. Now, for the remaining 8 CAs, there are 2 categories. 2 are responsible for the central work, and the others are for the projects that we'd like to add an additional, or the 7th one to deal with the housing projects. Mr. Leung, what's going to happen to this post once the projects are out of the way? You have an additional manpower, so these will remain for us forever, or is it a contract post? Permanent Secretary? The members reminded us that for a long time to come, we have to deal with these projects. We will not slacken our efforts. So this is going to be a long-term lead. Members have a point. One of these days, when the production varies from the situation today, we will look at the manpower needs. Other than the new housing projects, the department has some other works to do. We will make the suitable deployment. Mr. Leung, well, this is all very complicated. I don't think I can understand it. I will talk about it when it comes to the ESC meeting. I find it too complicated myself. I know what you're talking about, but I'm mystified. Second round, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, 3 minutes, please. Madam Chair, other than more manpower, I'd like to put this to the department. Now, you need to have more manpower because of sheer volume of work, and you have to get on with it. Now, there was a mention of quality, as alluded to by Mr. Tony J. Now, with more manpower, what new initiatives will you be putting in place to ensure that quality will not be compromised because of the sheer volume of production? So we have to guard against any slip-ups. Now, we do still remember the substandard piling saga that is still fresh in our mind. How can you make sure that all these untoward incidents won't happen? Permanent Secretary? And as a matter of principle, I can say that in terms of quality, we maintain a very high standard for ourselves. Now, when a piece of land becomes available, sometimes the land is in irregular shape and it may be small. We have to look at all the sunlight, the ventilation. There are 25 items there to make sure that the buildings that we build will be up to standard. We have a principal architect who is responsible for procurement. The Housing Authority has a procurement system which is very stringent. Like, for instance, we do have pretty stringent requirements in terms of industrial safety. Our statistics show that all these efforts are paying dividends. So we have to monitor the contractors to make sure that they measure up to scratch in terms of industrial safety, and all these will not be compromised. We also have to look at the environmental side of the equation. All these are merely examples, and Mr. Kwok talked about quality. There are so many different things involved when it comes to quality. Now, we do have a professional insistence there. Unless members have any further questions, would members indicate whether they support this paper to be referred to the ESC for consideration? Right, majority support. So we agree that this will be referred to the ESC. Any other business? Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.